Condor, Steph, and I'll just go with that.
Okay. Hi there. I'm Steph Condor with Related Northwest, Senior Vice President of Development. Related opened an office in Portland 5 years ago, and we are partnering with a lot of nonprofits to bring our expertise and bring some capacity and do some pretty interesting projects. I'm very excited today to share with the first projects that we ever did here in Portland. You?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So good to see some familiar faces. I'm Mary Rain O'Mara, Senior Director of Community Development at Central City Concern. And we were the development partner with Related Northwest for 2 of the projects that we'll be talking about today. And the third, which is opening in 2024, we are the developer as well. I'll hand it over to Lori.
Good afternoon. My name is Lori Linville Gregston. I'm principal at Acromoyson Architects and was lucky enough to be project manager in all 3 projects with a fabulous team here and working alongside Jenna.
And my name is Jenna Mogstad. I'm an associate interior designer at Incremoyson. I provided the interior design services for all 3 projects we'll be talking about today. And of course, worked with Megan all the way at the end there.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Megan Hertag. I've been a project manager with Walsh Construction for about 7 years, in the construction industry for 19. And I was lucky enough to get involved with Cedar Commons at schematic design level, and I've been the project manager for all 3 projects.
Okay, thanks, guys. Next, Lori here will give a little bit of background and introduction on the 3 projects, and we'll have some information and photos that you guys can take a look at up at the top too.
So, a little recap for all the projects. The Outer Southeast Division, can you hear me? This close? This seems very loud. Okay. The Outer Division Street, Southeast Division Street Continuum was conceived in 2018 by Related Northwest and Central City Concern to support Portland Housing Bureau's mission to provide more affordable housing and the Cedar Commons housing first, permanent support housing, SRO, single resident occupancy units, as well as studios. Prioritize program-driven design with lots of community space, both inside and out, and wraparound services and design integrating interiors and exterior for a building, a place that feels like home. Next came Crescent Court. Crescent Court apartments offering affordable family housing with 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms and some studios, of course, too, with market rate amenities so a family can stay long-term and grow. Services from Central City Concern, Boys and Girls Club in Portland, are available on site for residents, plus community outreach with ERCO. Now under construction, as Mary Rain just mentioned, Meridian Gardens, permanent supportive recovery housing. To the west of Cedar Commons borders, what will be shared community garden, 4 boxes, Megan. A smaller site. The main design concept was trauma-informed design to ensure residents of all backgrounds feel comfortable there.
Next slide.
Are you able to advance the slide for us?
Sorry, I am.
Okay.
Sometimes it takes.
There you go.
Thank you. So Meridian Gardens under construction. Staff presence is located on all floors instead of only the ground, as was in Cedar Commons. So integrated into the community, offering a sense of security without feeling surveyed. All 3 projects push the envelope of sustainability measures. Earth Advantage multifamily platinum is being achieved by Cedar Commons and Crescent Court, and Meridian Gardens is on track as designed as an all-electric building to Central City Concern's climate action commitment.
Lori. Okay, now we just have some questions that we will be getting answers from these lovely ladies on. So our first question is, what was the original vision for the projects?
Okay, so this is how it actually went down. I'd opened the off, but actually I hadn't even started with Related, and I was driving around with my kids looking for dirt during the summer. That was our summertime together. And we've, it's true. So this is off of 115th and Division, and one of the sites was marketed. And I talked to the broker and I was like, what about the site across the street? What's that? And they were like, well, the family owns that too. And I was like, tell me more. So we were able to get into contract on both deals, not really knowing exactly what we were going to do, but I knew they were great sites. So what I really loved about them, flat, vacant, 1 acre parcel, and then next door, 2 acre parcel. I knew that there was synergy between that. Having formerly worked at Central City Concern, I knew also that the Blackburn was about a mile or so away. And I thought there was a really great opportunity to maybe work with Central City Concern again. So Portland Housing Bureau had a funding round coming up that was the PSH pilot project. So this was their first PSH project. And what that really meant was they were taking CET funds for the capital and then pairing it with operating subsidy. It was the first time they'd actually did like capital and operating subsidy. Now we're in a totally different world, right? Where that is the commonplace. Went back to Central City Concern, pitched the idea, what could we do here? Had already an existing relationship with Ankrum and Walsh, and kind of put what I think is like the band back together. So that was really fun. And then I also knew about, we went in for lift on the bigger project, but didn't get it. But Portland Housing Bureau had a funding round coming up, so we repositioned it for family. The whole idea was a continuum of, for Cedar Commons, the 60 units to be for formerly homeless, addiction and recovery services, case management. And the idea was some of those folks may want to elevate out of that type of intensive case management housing over into family housing. What we know is that when folks are displaced from their neighborhood, from their service providers, they can relapse. It's just a lot harder to get reconnected. So having this continuum is a really positive opportunity. You want to say some things? Why not?
Yeah, absolutely. Always. So for Central City Concern, these three sites have been an opportunity for us to expand our really the menu of options of housing for the clients we serve, right? So we've heard about Cedar Commons, which is a housing first model, 60 units. We do have set asides for people experiencing mental health conditions. So that is a federally qualified health center. We have on-site qualified mental health professionals. So it is a clinical site that is serving many of the residents in the building. Crescent Court, as we've heard, is the family project. And so we are there offering services. We were really excited to partner with Boys and Girls Club as a new partnership and have that as one of the options. And then the third site, actually, I think Steph, you said, hey, it might be coming up for sale. And so Steph was also a little bit of the impetus there. And we were able to actually combine 2 sites. So through a broker, we reached out to the site that wasn't marketed, but they were interested in selling. And so we were able to tie that up. And again, the program for Meridian Gardens is 85 units, 65 are permanent recovery housing for people that are exiting homelessness and who are experiencing a substance use disorder. We have the beautiful courtyard garden in between Cedar and Meridian. So we'll be expanding that garden area and really providing that connection between those 2 predominantly permanent supportive housing sites.
Right. What was the approach in integrating permanent supportive housing throughout the 3 projects?
Yeah. Oh, we can do like sing to each other. Okay. So, obviously the first one to go was Cedar Commons. So that was a much higher level of permanent supportive housing. But next door, for the family building, 138 units of family housing, a lot of 3s. I think we have like 23 3-bedrooms. So big families living in there. And the funding wanted integrated family permanent supportive housing. So, and this was all new, right? All new. Now we're seeing this more and more prevalently, but we really felt like bringing in Central City Concern made a lot of sense because they're one of the premier providers of case management services. And from my experience working with Central City Concern, oftentimes their programmed housing was having a hard time finding kind of exit housing, family housing, and workforce housing. So bringing more housing to their portfolio was really helpful to keep the programs moving and keep people in their 12 to 24 month programs being able to move out. So that was a big piece of it. What else? What would you like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is, funding driven, right? So the scale and presence of PSH in all three sites varies, with Cedar and Meridian having the highest proportion of PSH. In terms of the integration, we do like to have at Central City Concern, even within a building that's predominantly PSH, 20 to 30 units is generally our mix lately of what we call fair market affordable. So those are units that might range from 30 up to 60% of AMI. Those are folks that are not PSH qualified, but they might be working for Central City Concern in one of our employment programs. They might just get on a waiting list and qualify for the affordable housing. It also offers a way for people that are ready to transition out of PSH but want to stay in the same building, an opportunity for them to stay in that community and access an affordable unit within the same building.
All right. How did we integrate operations, staff, and client voice into the designs?
Okay, I'll start. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the real synergy was having formerly worked at Central City Concern and understanding kind of intimately some of the things that they're trying to achieve in their design, and also all the different departments and working with folks. But also I was learning about related standards and their standards and designs. And so usually what we do is we put like a basis of design, a program together, and our standards and specs, and we slide it across the table to our architect and our GC and say, this is really kind of the compendium. This is it. This is what we need to really make sure to adhere to. But then working with Central City Concern, as everything evolves, right? Lessons learned from the past projects, populations changing, really looking at what the needs are for this particular population that we're going to be working with, and figuring out, what are their needs, especially around the PSH, right? And maybe you can talk about some of those, and then maybe I'll talk just a minute about the family piece.
Yeah, absolutely. So at CCC, we have in-house property management, facilities, resident services, all under our umbrella. So for Cedar Commons and Meridian, we're the operator and the service provider and the owner of those buildings. So when I come to a development process, I'm not the expert. I'm often telling the architects, we have to take that back to facilities. Give us a week. And similarly, we take it to our tenants and our clients. And Heather Hollingsworth, who's here, one of my amazing project managers for Meridian Gardens, did an extensive community engagement process. And I know we'll hear a little bit more about that in terms of how tenants were visited at Cedar and what came out of that. Visited clients that are in recovery programs at Central City Concern, and currently living in our housing, and talked about what makes community. Visited with our culturally specific programs and got a lot of different input. And as Steph mentioned, it's never 100% right. We look at every project as an opportunity to learn more, to grow, to integrate client and staff experience and expertise, really. And so it's really been a fun journey working on these three projects. But me as the developer, I'm not the expert. I'm looking for all of that input from others. And Related's approach as well has been really to look to Central City Concern on Crescent Court for our input. And during design and construction, we continue that process.
So just one thing. So the impetus for being out in Southeast Portland was actually when the Portland Housing Bond came out. Portland Housing Bureau was going out to each neighborhood. And so I was following them around because it was great because you're getting all this feedback from residents and folks. That's where I actually met Immigrant and Refugee Community Organization and got to sit at roundtables and hear about some of the problems that were happening with the housing that they were currently living in. So lack of storage space, lack of large bedroom units, some of the, after school programs that they would like to see. So that really informed me about when I started thinking about what kind of housing I wanted to do out in Southeast Portland. ERCO was a big piece of that. So, and then having the relationship with Central City Concern and knowing some of the things that they were really trying to achieve out there with the Blackburn and that hub and spoke model, because you're getting a lot of synergy because they have that large presence out there about a mile away that you can expand your services. Also, ERCO is out on, I think, 104th and Gleason, and Boys and Girls Club has their Rockwood Club off of 185th and Stark. So it was trying to figure out how do you maximize and leverage those like large bricks and mortar space into a co-located housing project. And so that was really kind of how I went about, thinking it up, I guess you can say.
I was going to riff on that a little bit. And ultimately, when we did the community outreach and also the data collection for the programming, we got together with all those groups. We had work sessions with ERCO, we had work sessions with Boys and Girls Club. We had feedback from Central City Concern. Also, we based some of our SROs and studios off of the Blackburn Center. So we started as that was our precedent project, because this is if you will, a satellite of Blackburn Center was and does avail itself of the services offered there. So even though it's got in-house wraparound services, it still can be linked to Blackburn Center. So then again with Meridian Gardens, we had Heather and taking away those firsthand experiences to inform the design direction was invaluable. So it seems like every time we do this, we get better and better.
Yeah, more of the same. So a benefit of having the same team on 3 consecutive projects is we did really learn from, we got lessons learned and we learned from mistakes. We got better and better. And just timing wise, we always do a pretty robust 1-year warranty walk, make sure the building is functioning as it's intended to. And we invited the design team out for a 1-year warranty walk for Cedar Commons. And we were in the middle of design for Meridian Gardens. So we took a lot of the lessons learned, materials, equipment, and put that into the design for Meridian Gardens to make it even better.
This project had a ton of firsts. So the Cedar Commons site is zoned on an R1. And so we had to, I wanted to mention this because it is important. Some of the developers in the room will be interested in this process. They were questioning SROs on an R1. They were like, it's not residential. So Incrum was really good about technically coming up with all of the points of why it's residential, that it's on a longer term lease, that, this is permanent supportive housing. So we had to test through it, but we jumped that hoop. And then the next hoop was BOLI. And BOLI was like, SROs are commercial. It's not housing. And we're like, well, funny thing is, if it wasn't housing, we couldn't develop this in an R1. And here's our letter. It's housing and it's a long-term lease and we have low income housing tax credits. So we had to prove all that out. And that was the first in the state to actually pass the BOLI test and not be prevailed for an SRO project. So there was a lot of hurdles to jump to be able to get that one done, but we learned a lot. I feel like we set really good precedents with the operating subsidy, Central City Concern and their service group getting in there and saying, okay, slow it down, joint office. How can we use this? And we also had Multnomah County. It was 6 different pots of money, and they got better with time, right? And so, yeah.
Yeah, I think, one of the important lessons learned with Cedar, as Steph mentioned, this was a pilot before we had really the Metro Supportive Housing Services dollars out and flowing. So we were right before closing or post before they said, and by the way, you get 30 ARLA vouchers, Metro Supportive Housing. We're like, thank you, we'll take it. But that wasn't in the pro forma. And so, we took it, but that was another funding source coming in. And the project was not funded on the services side to the same extent that we knew joint office was starting to fund projects, right? The 10,000 per unit per year, that became sort of the standard when Metro Supportive Housing was official. And so after we were up and running, with some services staff, some property management staff, it became clear that we needed that full subsidy. And so we did work with the county. We negotiated for about a year and just really pressed to, you are funding other PSH projects at this higher level. We absolutely need 24/7 staff coverage in this building. We're housing super vulnerable folks. We need more mental health services in the building. And fortunately, the county, through the behavioral health department that manages the contract, listened and they doubled our services contract so that we could do our mission there even better. So again, there's lessons in design, there's lessons in funding, there's lessons in engagement that have really evolved throughout the course of these projects.
One other thing, it's all coming back to me now. It was a few years ago. No perm debt on the permanent supportive housing project, which is, that's one big tool out of the toolbox. So really hard to kind of make everything work. A very sensitive financial model. We were able to close Cedar Commons, I think, within 11 months from the time of award. And, when we go in for award, we only go in with a concept and a very loose one. The reason for the ability to close quickly is because a few things outside of a design overlay. So we did not have any design review. We were able to just kind of go with it. The reason it's 3 stories is because of the R1, blah, blah, blah. Walsh is a very known entity to Central City Concern and to myself, and Ankrum. I've worked with both of them. So we all kind of knew like how to work with each other. So a very effective team to be able to just quickly get through design. And then the next deal, I think we closed within 12 or 13 months on large division. All of them delivered on time and within budget during COVID. So really good team of being efficient, and that's cost savings.
And not only that too, but I mean, I first obviously joined on Cedar Commons with our first go around and doing the interiors on that. A lot of lessons learned, a lot of assumptions made when, we thought at the time this was durable. Residents come in and say, no, it's not. And so, with those post-occupancy walks, it's super critical from an interior design standpoint, just to know, is that LVT really going to work? Or were the paint colors that we selected okay? Even though in all of my research saying this is trauma informed, it's not. The internet can only give you so much. It's that real world lived in experience that is going to provide you that insight. So things all the way down to, I think the most standout one was we had wood doors, thinking, ooh, these are going to be nice. It's going to elevate things. Well, things get carved into wood doors, unsavory things. So, now we learned, let's paint so that those can easily be sanded out and touched up. They don't have to, sand it out and try and match the stain. So even coming in and hearing from the facilities, people who are actually having to go in and fix all of the stuff, that's just the most valuable and super, super critical, I think, feedback that you can get is talking to those facilities people and then talking with residents, hearing what they have to say. Because at the start of it, it's always usually like, mushy of, I'm so happy we're here. This building is so beautiful. Thank you so much. And then you come in a year later and they're like, well, we've got a list. So, it's really important, I think, to check in with your clients, with the staff, with everybody after the fact. And obviously we're all still in contact. So we just have a constant flow of information of things that still, can be improved upon. So next time. Anyone else?
We usually we use a third-party property manager. So, the Cedar Commons was a turnkey to Central City Concern where we partnered, we provided all the construction guarantees and all of that. And then basically at 8609, we exit. So that provides them to have very little risk financially. And then on the larger building, the family building, we have a third-party property manager. We co-own it together. And I think where I was going with that is just, those types of things, every deal is different and how you partner, but it's nice to have the flexibility with a partner like Central City Concern where they can own and operate and do it really well, but then are also willing to come in and be a service provider and a co-owner. We go in after the fact with actually a whole thing for property management to fill out. How do you like the building? What would you do different? What do you think about this on every single building? And I highly recommend that because some of the things are super surprising. We're like, we thought it was such a great idea and lovely. And they're like, it's worse, so I think just humble yourself with that experience. It's very telling.
We can move on. Okay. All right. How have sustainability aspirations played a role in the projects?
Well, I have my backup in the audience, Director of Climate Change at CCC, Rachel Moss. Hello. But I'll try to read not too scripted from the excellent notes she provided. But I think, you heard that each building is Earth Advantage Platinum. So we are achieving that on all 3 buildings. Central City Concern, we have a stated climate action values, and one of those is to electrify our entire portfolio. I don't know if we yet have set a year, but we've got a big portfolio. So for our new construction, we are going 100% electric. So Meridian is 100% electric. Central heat pump hot water heater. We have installed EV charging stations at Cedar Commons. We will go even further at Meridian Gardens with 8 EV charging stations. We're also launching an EV car share program for our tenants for Cedar and Meridian, and I hope we can extend it to Crescent as well, right? And so that's been an interesting learning as well, taking the opportunity to our tenant advisory committee and really coming from a place of, EV is still kind of inaccessible and it's expensive to buy those vehicles. Is there going to be interest? And there was really strong interest from our tenants. And so we're super excited to be launching that more on, the operations side, but, really thinking forward to how can we both build, but then operate with sustainability in mind. All 3 buildings have pretty extensive solar arrays. What else am I missing? Design? Yes,
So,
I'm gonna.
So Crescent Court, we really we're starting to look at resiliency. We know that our most vulnerable residents are living in our housing, and climate and natural disasters are unfortunately something that we're really seeing, and that exposes them to a lot of risk and just issues. So at not large division anymore, that's what we used to call it. It's its secret name at Crescent Court. We have a solar array, but we also have a battery backup that keeps the community room going. We have extra charging stations just to, we would call this resiliency 1.0. We're actually working on something in Clackamas County that's 2.0, that's taking kind of that playbook and saying, okay, what else can we do to up our game here? And a lot of it we're seeing is things around programming. So it's not just the sticks and bricks, it's about services and connecting the dots with medical, food, water. Bike charging. That was a thing because, folks live further out. They might be more interested in EV bikes. What else do we got the PGE solar grant, I think, on both projects. I want to say all 3. Yeah. And so that's a huge catalyst for doing a large array and really important. Yeah. What else? You kind of, you built it.
I was going to mention about our,
Put in there.
Started with a good design.
oh yeah, well, when we
So-
started with the PHB design, every
Yes.
project we started with PHB, and green building standards.
Yep.
That was the first 2. Sorry. That was the first 2 projects where we did the eco charrettes for Earth Advantage and got all of the stakeholders in. Walsh, our design build, MEP design build people were also involved. Interiors, architecture, civil, landscape, everyone. So we talked through all of the measures to come up with specific strategies for each different project. And then by the time we got to Meridian, We were looking at the Central City Concern, Rachel. She came to the meeting, Rachel, before she had a baby, she came to the meeting and said, here's a list of measures that I think we should do. And we were going, oh, okay, we're raising the bar. So one of them was not using P-tax. So the first two projects used P-tax, and we're thinking, well, how are we going to do this? And then, of course, there's a funding story there. We ended up getting mini splits with condensers on the roof now. We also have heat pump. We have a generator for resiliency, which is not required by code, but it's something that in the light of recent climate situations that the community, the residents are protected just in case. And so, yeah, pushing the envelope once again. I think that I'm fully confident that we're going to get platinum, and
Yep.
the next one is going to have a higher bar.
Yeah, I think starting with all of those measures built into the design is really key. I mean, adding solar panels after the fact can be very difficult, but if they're in the design up front, you prep for it, you prepare for it, it's right there. It's easy as long as you keep track of all your documentation. I mean, we hit platinum on both projects without an issue. I think we blew past it, and we're on track to do the same for Meridian Gardens because it was all built in at the very beginning.
Yeah, I mean, one thing to note when these projects were in design, AC, PHB now requires AC in their properties. That wasn't the case back then, but I felt like we really needed to have AC. Even though it's expensive, it's hard to figure out and whatnot. And so the most cost effective for the projects with the limited funds we had was going with the PTHPs. Just as a note, I was looking back, we received on Cedar Commons, it was only 8.5 million in subsidy. I mean, it's like double that now for a project like that. It's just crazy. Well, so anyways, and it had AC.
All right, now we're going to put Megan on the spot for a little while. What are some of the benefits of having the contractor on board early? And then what are some strategies to avoid construction delays? Everyone's dying to know that one.
So getting involved in the project as early as possible really can be beneficial when the GC is involved early. During conceptual design is the best. It means we can help have input on constructability, cost-efficient designs right from the beginning. Because true value engineering doesn't come at the end when you cut off units, right? It's an iteration of design. Every design phase, you look at it, you get pricing on it, you do an estimate, you figure out if the budget needs to be readjusted, if we have to do a redesign. That's true value engineering. And so if you get the GC involved early on, you can achieve that. We had a couple of examples on these projects. On Cedar Commons, we actually came in at our SD estimate at about 30% over our conceptual estimate, which was a big deal. So we had to go back to the drawing board, do a full redesign to get us back within budget, but then we didn't have any other budget issues for the rest of the estimates. We were able to stay, yeah, we gave money back at the end of construction and finished 3 weeks early. Yeah. During COVID. So another example was during all the craziness with inflation last year, we were in the middle of design on Meridian Gardens, and our DD estimate came in $4 million over budget, which I'm sure all of you know that story. We all experienced that, but we knew it early, and we knew it early enough that CCC was able to go secure other funds. And then we cruised into a permit and award without any issues. So yeah, those are the benefits of having the GC on board early.
I can give another one too. Yeah, well, dirt's a big one, and also MEP coordination. So going design build, we're seeing right now in the industry with MWESB requirements, the only deals that are really building right now are public projects that have MWESB requirements. So your sub pool is really constrained. Getting your MEP on board early is really critical to locking down some of the really big trades so you can hit your numbers. And that's why having your GC on early can nail down some of your numbers so you don't have that risk. The other thing is I'm a huge fan of dirt coordination meetings. We call them dirt hoedowns in our office. And we bring in civil Our environmental, I am now bringing in actually an earthwork sub, even though they're not signed up, because they see things much differently than maybe the rest of us theoretically are seeing things. We have our structural there, our GC, we use a third-party construction manager. And so we do it multiple times throughout the design, because that is where your biggest risk is in the first, part of your development. That's where you're going to lose all your contingency. It can be very heartbreaking. And I really hate that. So that's why you want to bring your GC on it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just speak again to the funding nuance, right? So having your GC involved very early in any project, knowing that you have certain funds coming in at application. And as we've heard, things can change with code, with requirements as you go along. Meridian Gardens, we went in thinking it would be a 4% LIHTC application. And things changed at OHCS right as we were about to apply. It was cut off and whole new world, it's competitive. And so, we had a little uncertainty about, what the LIHTC environment was going to look like. We also have 65 project-based vouchers on that project. So we're working through a federal environmental review and federal subsidy layering review. Fortunately, OHCS was an amazing partner, and they awarded the easiest 9% I've ever been through, which was just we're switching you to 9% because we were already in the pipeline. So fortunately, they were great partners. We met all the criteria for a 9% award, but we then had HTF, right? Which is another federal source, Housing Trust Fund, which is another federal source. And each source brings a little bit different requirements. So having your GC on board that is nimble and able to jump and say, okay, you've got your federal requirements, you've got your local requirements, you've got new requirements coming in, is just so critical to keeping the project moving forward. The other point I'll make is working with a general contractor that knows your base specifications and your team is really, really valuable, because you're not recreating the wheel each time. You can really go in with greater expediency at delivering the project.
Megan, do you want to speak to also the ordering early of things?
Yes.
Is it? Okay.
Well, I was going to just add on to not only just having Megan and Walsh on board from the beginning with BCL, also a team that we know each other. We've been working together for almost 4 years now. We have a lot of the same consultants, civil, landscape, even the subs. I sometimes give them a call if I need to coordinate directly with design build. I make sure Megan knows, because I don't want her to not know I'm calling her sub. But it's almost like we're a well-oiled machine. And if there's problems that come up, and they do come up, we can work through them and get together, can coordinate and come to solutions. So yeah, it's just a real pleasure.
The other thing from an interior standpoint, and I think that a lot of designers out there do that, this isn't new, but I get pricing on everything up front as I'm ordering it, before I even order samples of things, because I don't want to fall in love with something. I don't want the client to fall in love with something and then snatch it away from them. And so having multiple projects with Megan as our project manager, being able just to say, what's my budget on tile? Like, let's be real here, because I'm looking at like a $10 one right now. Yes or no? It's a no, but so I'm able to kind of get an under the table informal list of, well, here are some budgets that we want you to stick in with, here are some things that we have learned from other subs on other projects. And so having that kind of insight and getting pricing on everything when I'm presenting finishes, labeling it with our exact price so that everything is as transparent as possible. I think that's been a huge key to with the projects.
Well, and just a shout out to Jenna. She's the most cost-conscious interior designer I've ever met. It's been amazing working with her. She will call me up and say, I'm so sorry, the $1 square foot tile got discontinued. Can I go with a $2 square foot tile? I'm like, yes, you can. The labor's still more expensive than that. So it's been amazing.
Thanks. Okay. All right. What are some strategies on mitigating financial impacts due to the world as it is right now? COVID, supply chain, wildfire,
all the things.
all the doom and gloom.
Yeah. I mean, each project had their own unique challenge, and I think every project does, but Cedar Commons, we had COVID. Crescent Court, we had supply chain issues. Meridian and COVID and wildfires. Meridian Gardens is, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm sure there will be something.
Everybody knock on wood right now.
Just so for Crescent Court in particular, though, the supply chain issues really hit us hard about halfway through the project. And luckily at that point, we had a really good team rapport and communication because we had to deal with supply chain issues and labor issues and material availability on a weekly, if not daily basis, changing things around. So there's one specific instance with the bathroom sheet vinyl. We found out that our sheet vinyl that was tracking on schedule, all of a sudden it's sitting on a boat in the middle of the ocean and can't dock and can't unload. So our supplier gave us an alternate, and we took a couple of days, ran it by Jenna, got it approved. It was already sold to somebody else. So we got a third alternate. And they're like, yep, it's in the warehouse. And they went out and looked in the warehouse and it wasn't there. It had already been sold to somebody else. So we finally got to a fourth option. This is all within like about a week. And within, I think, 2 hours, we had the option emailed to Jenna. She approved it. We confirmed it was a no cost increase, and we got it approved and ordered in about 2 hours. So we just had stuff like that happen on a pretty regular basis there for a good chunk of time. And then it got installed and Jenna came out and said, "This looks fantastic. I love it."
Well, you're being nice. I did say it was better than what I had originally specified. So, happy accidents.
Happy accidents. But it was just, because we had this tight knit group and our owner's rep, he really appreciated. I'd call him up with a problem and I'd have a solution ready to go. And it got to the point where he said, "Just go." We may not know the full cost impact. I may not have all of the pricing, but I know it's within a tolerance and we got to move forward. So that was the kind of relationship that we forged in fire there during the supply chain issues. But I did want to just talk about just a couple of kind of standard strategies, things that we do to mitigate risk on all projects. One, we do work closely with our subcontractors during our design estimates to identify the long lead items and get orders in before construction starts. So on Meridian Gardens, we got our electrical gear order in last November and our windows ordered in January for a July start. So we've already received some of our electrical gear. Yes. So that's really important to get them involved. And also, as we get closer to construction, like I identify the really, really long leads early, but then our field guys will put together a really detailed submittal schedule where they'll tie it to everything in the schedule. So we know when I have to have the subcontracts written, when we have to have the submittals in and approved, and when we need to get the material ordered. So we're not missing our dates later on down the line. So sometimes that is a very, very quick buyout we have to do up front, depending on the lead times. And it's also helpful to be able to go to Jenna and say, "Hey, by the way, that's a 40-week lead time. Maybe can we choose a different tile?" So that's helpful too. The other thing that we do is we always maintain a running value engineer and add back list. And we start that at schematic design. And we always have our plus minuses depending on where our estimates come in. And then once we hit construction, we tie all of those decisions that we've delayed to a specific decision date. And we make sure that that's early enough that it's not going to cause additional rework or delays. And so that's something that we carry throughout the entire project.
Sorry, I should just use my voice. And what that means too with the BCL is sometimes things that we've removed at the beginning get to come back because we have money for it, which is awesome.
Courts,
So-
window sills.
Yeah. And one of the things too, I appreciate about having Walsh and working with having Walsh and working with this team is the design strategy. We approach it from cost containment, which is in alignment with, I thought I saw. Yeah, where is he? Yeah, Mike. The cost containment approach about stacking units, about working, exactly. So I think for Meridian Gardens, I got a list from Megan about, can we have overhangs? And a few other things like, yes, we're working on that because ultimately due to zoning and fire access, we had to have overhangs and flatter roofs. So all of that panned out quite well, but we design buildings that are efficient, are on module, are stacking, and are double, on a double-ended corridor. So those are the things that we do together that we're in sync with. But yeah, really appreciate the BCL because we got a lot of fun things back, and hopefully for Meridian, we'll get garden boxes. We got the garden boxes.
I can say one thing. So both Cedar Commons and Crescent Court, we had no project-based vouchers. So we weren't prevailed on anything. We didn't have Davis-Bacon, so we didn't have residential, commercial prevailing wage. We didn't have to go through the environmental review. So that was part of the ability to be able to close quickly, but it also is cost controls, right? Because you don't have the labor rates. So it's one thing. Yeah.
All right. One last question, and then we can go to questions from all of you. What was the permitting process like for the projects?
Hey, I'll get this by the time we finish. So all projects followed Portland Affordable Housing's development process, beginning with the notice of funding, the NOFA, and then design, permitting, and construction. So the process is normally streamlined for affordable housing by designating it type 2 priority, which allows for Portland Housing Bureau assistance. Of course, we have the exemption from DRB, but that's because of the overlay. We're out far enough that we're not required. A shortened entitlement reviewed, and then a project case manager. For all 3 projects, we've had the same person, and she's been awesome. If we've hit a snag in the road, she's reached out to the department to tap them, or helped us get a hold of somebody who could help expedite things. This has been pretty essential. Like on Cedar Commons, we were waiting for one of the viewers to finish, and it wasn't happening, and somehow there were communications to encourage that to finish on time. So she is fantastic, and I can't say enough about her. But of course, there were always jurisdictional challenges, and we got together, we negotiated, we sat down at the table to come to solutions. I mean, one of the things that impacted us, 2 of the projects, was access to the site at the same time as navigating the new vision, zero, it's the bus route, but it's the Vision Zero traffic safety corridor with a bus route that links Mountain Community College to downtown Portland. So effectively, they've installed a meridian that you can't cross. So every exit from the site is right turning. So with Crescent Court, they eliminated a driveway. So we had to go onto the site by only one access, and that involves sitting down with various agencies to get them to agree, because zoning prohibited access from 115. So pretty much all of the hurdles that we had to navigate was either with appeals or meetings to get people to get at the same table and then find solutions.
I think site selection is a critical piece. Being outside of a design overlay and having a right to build really can fast track your project rather than having to go through, conditional use and things like that can really kind of be laborious, or design review, cost, design cost, construction cost, all of those things can be really prohibitive. So I think site selection can really help you in your permitting process when you think about those things of what do I want to build, and is it permissible, and what is the process? And that is like the very beginning of it.
Yeah, we were almost kicked into conditional use because of the interpretation of group living as opposed to household living. So with group living, we would have been required to have a kitchen per 6 units.
Yeah.
So
yeah, with the SRO model, I don't know, everybody understands what that is. So single room occupancy, there is kind of like a common area kitchen where people come in and prepare their food. In their unit, they have a private bathroom, but it's not showering facilities. And this type of design is intentional to serve individuals that may find having a kitchen and a larger unit just too much to deal with. So we try to really simplify it. Also gets them to get out of their unit and socialize more, be seen and see each other. But it's also getting the planning department to see it your way and to agree to that. And so that's what we were talking about earlier, is getting through those hurdles of making it permissible. But I think Incrum was really awesome at, lining it out to them and getting in front of them and, kind of going to the mat for this project. So it was good.
Yeah, the PHB liaison is so valuable in the permitting process. So one of the things we experience at Central City Concern is we utilize a lot of different funding sources. And we have projects that don't have any PHB interaction, and we have a very different experience with the city, even though, it's almost always shelter, transitional housing, clinical services for the same population. We've really found that liaison, the gator process, as they call it, is expedited, and we see faster turnaround on our permits for new construction than we do on acquisition rehab without PHB dollars. And so that's one of the things we've been advocating with the city, like, look, all of these projects are needed, whether or not PHB is involved. Let's replicate the PHB model for anything where you have an affordable housing or service provider coming in and doing development within the city.
Or just give us one PHB dollar, please.
Yeah.
And what's great about the PHB is they're embedded. They show up at almost all the meetings throughout the design process, including the energy charrette. So they know what's going on.
Okay. Are there any questions out in the audience? You can either yell or I can come to you with the microphone. It's your choice. Yeah. Do you want the mic?
Thank you all for being here. This seems like a really wonderful project. I get really excited about community engagement processes as a part of development projects. And so I heard you all speak to that a little bit. And one of the things that I'm really curious about and interested in is kind of like a closed loop community engagement process where the outcomes and the decisions that ultimately were made get put back out to community in a way that's visible, in terms of, we took all this time and all y'all's time to get your input, and in these regards we were able to deliver, and in these regards we weren't, and this is why. So I'm curious to hear a little bit more specifics on what your community engagement processes are like. I'm also very curious about the continuum, but it sounds like it might be a little too early on to know what those transitions are going to be like, since these just launched. But yeah, if you could speak a little bit more to community engagement, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, happy to. So for Cedar Commons, the design was really established based on some tenant input, but also professional Central City Concern input. Again, our staff bring a lot of expertise, since this is housing at Cedar that's focused on supporting people with mental health conditions. We both had the client input, but also staff around good clinical space, what is trauma informed, what will make a supportive community. We also had the dynamic of the pandemic, where we couldn't do as much engagement sort of during the, some of those phases as we would typically. So with Meridian, we knew that we really wanted to do a much deeper engagement process. So it started with the 1-year warranty walk at Cedar Commons, because since we weren't able to do as much engagement, we said, well, let's go back and talk to residents about what's working, what's not. That's what you heard about, a lot of different perspectives came out of that, right? And so we were able to use that input based on folks living in Cedar Commons. And then Heather, and I'll welcome Heather if you want to grab a mic and speak to this, because this was all your amazing work. Heather convened multiple focus groups with CCC clients. So one focus group at Blackburn with clients who live at Blackburn and who are engaged in recovery services at our Blackburn Center. Our culturally specific program, Puentes, who serves the Latinx community out in East Portland, Flip the Script, Imani, and Caribou, which serve African-American community members, Central City Concern clients. Who am I missing, Heather? Tenant Advisory Committee, right? So we have a standing tenant advisory committee at Central City Concern. So every project we'll take and say, hey, we're doing it again. We're about to build something. We want all of your input. All of those tenants live in different buildings throughout CCC's portfolio. So they're bringing all sorts of input. I will say one of the interesting pieces that changed in our SRO model during the pandemic. So we were building another building downtown, the Starlight. And we decided to start building in small kitchenettes in the SROs as a public health response, right, to the pandemic. We've continued that model with Meridian Gardens because we heard from clients that that is really something they'd like to see in their units. We also heard from Puentes, I believe, about the cultural importance of being able to cook together. So we had started eliminating stoves in our community kitchens. And we're like, we got to bring the stoves back because people want to be able to gather and cook and bake and have that time. In the SRO model, those community and gathering spaces are really essential, making sure that you're building in a lot of common space. We asked questions like, is it okay if we have a recovery group room on your residential floor, or does that feel invasive? And we heard actually the residents liked that idea because it felt like that would be more of their community to have those classes and programming happening. So really we get into a lot of detail as we're in that early design. And then we'll do a similar process with Meridian Gardens. Once folks move in, we'll go and have a community meeting. Hey, what's working, what's not? Some things it's like, we'll fix that in the next project. Some things are, oh, we can actually address that just based on additional supplies or some other change that we can make.
So some of the things that we did in community outreach, we always, especially with family housing, we really work hard with the Portland Public School. And this was the David Douglas School District. The Powell Gilbert Hurst, very long name, elementaries right behind the property. So meeting with them, connecting, just talking about, we're bringing 138 families to your school district right next door. What do you need? What would be helpful? Constant communication. And then what families do you have, because you're a Title I school, we know you have very low income families. How do we get them into this housing? So constant coordination. We had a great lease up response from that school. Related with Central City Concern and ERCO put on a food drive. So all of the partners, Ingram donated, Walsh donated, and came together. I think they donated almost 10,000, I want to say, and did a community food drive during that time. I'll never forget, there was a girl that came up with a wheelbarrow by herself to go and get the food bags that we were handing out from her school. And those types of things build neighborhood, build community, go beyond the bricks, right? To say that we're here, we are offering housing, but we're offering a lot more. Working with ERCO and working with their culturally specific, they've got their Africa House and their, and their Asian and Pacific Islander community that we worked a lot with. We had a lot of Afghani refugees coming in. And so understanding from that was born actually a Gleason project with Holst. And that is totally off of this model where we did one permanent supportive housing project with Catholic Charities and then a family housing project on the same site, 96 units, and a ton of community engagement and a lot of lessons learned. So I think that's one piece to say is it's a replicable model. And what's nice about it is Meridian Gardens was born out of the Division Street, projects, and Gleason was born from it as well. And they will go on and replicate, and you'll always continue to figure out how to do it better with community engagement and how to, be a better partner in the neighborhood. So.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that stuff, I remember when we did, because with the permitting process requires also an additional community outreach effort.
Yep.
And then you document it and you turn in the documentation when you submit your permit. And the first one was out of David Douglas, and we showed up there, and it was before COVID, well before COVID. And we were kind of concerned how people were going to be reacting to Crescent Court getting permanent supportive housing.
That was Cedar Commons.
I mean, excuse me.
Yeah, we're bringing permanent supportive housing.
Small
to
division.
Cedar. Yeah.
Yeah, and people were walking up to Steph and Mary Rain saying, my son went through the program with Central City Concern. We have so much faith. No one was opposed to the new development going in, because really it's the largest, that was the first of, I think, the largest development on that street. So if you look at the apartment housing, it's 3-story, and then the next apartments are 2-story. So, and then of course came Crescent Court, which is 4 stories. So they're the biggest presence on the street, but they feel part of the neighborhood. So
Southeast Portland is awesome for
Yeah.
developing. They were like
Totally
so good.
We did have the one obligatory parking question. I think parking is an interesting thing to talk about on these 3 sites because it's not required.
Yeah.
But this is another lesson, right? Coming out of another building that Central City Concern, Family Housing Hazel Heights on Stark and 127th. Not enough parking was provided on that site. I think really the density of units was the goal there. And so, you know, again, back to the community engagement, listening to the residents. And it's like, yeah, we hear you, you need parking. There's not much we can do at this project. Like, we want to acknowledge that our clients have cars in some, you know, communities. That is a reality. And so with all 3 of these projects, we have built parking lots in. And it's also part of the neighborhood, you know, response, being a good neighbor, right? Knowing that outer Southeast has a dynamic of not great street infrastructure. People are parking on the street. And so also listening to neighbors through this process. And really, you know, bringing forth, people who live in poverty have cars. People who are homeless are often, you know, sometimes living in their vehicles. Those are going to come with them when they move into permanent supportive housing. So, you know, parking is something that we've intentionally decided, and then for the family housing as well.
Yeah, actually overparked, I feel like. So at the family 2-acre site, flat as a pancake. I love that site. Had a little bit of dirt issues with, I think, 13 cesspools that we discovered, but hey, you know, but we ended up 138 units getting 90 parking spaces, which I think is kind of unprecedented when the city doesn't require any parking. But, you know, out in outer Southeast Portland, having learned from Hazel Heights, you know, that is an auto dependent community. Even though there is rapid transit there, it's not enough, but we're overparked. It's interesting, like, meaning more than enough parking, probably by a third, I would suspect. And a huge bike room that's very overparked, we'll say. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah. Anyone else? If you yell, I can repeat it in the microphone.
Yeah.
I know that the property what type of
So the question is, what type of amenities are in the 3 projects, and can residents kind of share across the 3 buildings, those amenities?
Yeah. I'll start with Crescent, which is the family housing related. This is probably one of our core competencies. And it was newer to me because having worked at Central City Concern, it's just a different product type. So related, you know, national developer, 55,000 units nationally, big developer that has 40 years of experience delivering affordable housing. We have an in-house architect that actually goes through and looks at all the Ancrum stuff and makes recommendations. So that was a really interesting thing. So we offer teen rooms, which have games, you know, foosball tables, things like that, soft seating, just a place where they can get away from mom and dad. Just, you know, as a teen, and having 3 teens of my own, I get it. So that was pretty cool. 2 large two multi-purpose rooms, one of which was outfitted and designed to house the after-school program for Boys and Girls Club, which is at no expense for the residents of Crescent Court. which is they're doing a summer program after school. It's really vibrant. It's a really nice space. And the kids seem to love it. And it makes me so happy to walk in there and see these kids just like, doing things. And it opens up to this courtyard because it's, this shape is kind of like a crescent. Funny. And it has a really nice, barbecue area, really nice seating area. It has a really big playground that the Boys and Girls Club actually opens out into. So that's pretty cool. Really good resident service space, like a whole area that is, and that's just our general population community room for community gatherings. And, it flexes for a host of different, things, celebrations, classes, things of that nature. We try to make flex as flexible as possible. So it's multi-purpose. Really great resident service space that have their own like counseling rooms, their own waiting rooms. So that has integrity and privacy. So that was a big deal. What else did they have there? I feel like it was like the playground's really good. Community. Yeah. So, laundry in the twos and in the 3 bedrooms, they have in-house laundry in their units, but then for everybody else, we have laundry rooms. It's fully secured, so the PSH residents aren't coming into the family building and vice versa. So the amenities that are on site are just for those residents. When we go to Gleason, it's a little bit more open. The courtyard's a little more open. We're going to have like the exercise equipment outside, a fitness room, a multicultural reading room, AKA library. Don't say library though, bully. And we got prevailed anyways. That's a whole nother conversation. And what else? Community gardens. That's what they have. You want to talk about Cedar?
Yeah, because Cedar and Meridian, with both being predominantly PSH, will share some amenities. Cedar, again, is a federally qualified health center. So the ground floor is really built around some of that clinical space. So we have clinical team offices, group room for therapy and classes, interview rooms for one-on-one sessions, community rooms throughout the building, again, with that SRO model and those amenities being really needed. A gated courtyard behind the building, which is a beautiful space with lots of edible blueberry bushes and such in the landscape. And then the central courtyard with the garden boxes that will be shared with Meridian Gardens. Meridian Gardens will be recovery housing. So again, focused on providing support services on site for people in recovery, a lot of group rooms, community amenities, and then the shared courtyard garden space. But we have talked about, if there are residents at Cedar that want to attend an AA group meeting at Meridian, cross the garden area, you're through the gate, and so really sharing the services and access to the extent possible. We're also looking at shared staff between the 2 buildings to the extent possible, because both buildings are property managed by Central City Concern. We'll share property management team between the 2. Probably services staff will overlap. So again, it's about building that cohesive team with the staffing, but also having some access between the 2 buildings with the different types of services that are offered.
And then one nice thing about Cedar Commons was that we actually, as a kind of project closeout team building activity, we, the construction team, the development team, the design team, built the garden boxes that are there as a nice bonding time. And those things now, they're popping. I mean, residents have used those like crazy. They're growing their own food. They're preparing them. They're doing garden therapy, we found out. So having that big outdoor space is really, really cool. We were all a little skeptical, but it's like their favorite amenity now, and everyone can use that. Any other questions? We're about 5 minutes to the end here. But you need a bathroom break? Yeah.
And I don't need to try to like the major topics those, and then were they all integrated?
Yeah. So I didn't hear the last part. What'd she say?
No debt, no.
Oh yeah, how did I do the rabbit out of the hat? So capital stack, the question was what was the funding sources? So on Cedar Commons, which is the PSH, it was construction excise tax, about $8.5 million, 4% tax credits, no perm debt, low cost construction, right? 3 stories, wood, still nice, but modest, right? Cost controls there. Got a screaming deal on the land. So that's good. And the land, the dirt had no environmental conditions. I mean, first ever. And I hope that happens again someday. That was nice. No, that was on large. Oh, a cesspool. Yeah. Then over on Crescent Court, that was Portland Housing Bond. And I can't remember, but I want to, if I was a guessing gal, I'd say that was about $13 million, 4% tax credits. This is when we were getting like really good pricing too, you know, that the market is kind of softened there. Perm debt. What else? We got PGE solar grants across both of them. I think that there was a gap funding from OHCS on Crescent Court. And that was about it. It was a pretty streamlined closing.
Hi, Anita. Good to see you. So for Meridian, as I referenced earlier, it's a Metro bond capital, and Metro Supportive Housing Services through joint office for operating subsidy. Project-based vouchers through Home Forward, 65 were awarded to the project and it turned into a 9%, right? So then we also had the Housing Trust Fund come in. We were able to avoid perm debt with the combination of the joint office operating subsidy where we can hire some of the staff using that operating subsidy. And then also the healthy cash flow coming in from the project-based vouchers into the building, right? That's the majority of the building. So that's how we were able to do that there. They did. Yeah. Yes, and we had a little bit of negotiation regarding SRO and studio. So if you want to talk about it, Holly, later, we can get into the weeds.
Right. Oh, are we talking about the Arla vouchers?
So these are project-based.
Yeah.
At Cedar, we have Arla. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, well, the Arla, they don't escalate to, they don't go up. I know somebody should jump on that one, but yeah. Yeah. Next year's panel discussion, not it.
All right, well, that's time. Thank you.
Thank
so
you,
much,
everyone.
for coming. No more questions.